revisit the events of the 6th of March. At that time, operations at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport were briefly paralyzed in the morning when members of the Aviation Workers Union went on strike. Now, to be clear, that strike was called off earlier this week on the 11th of March, but we've not yet really explored what led to that strike. You see, it started with a proposal from Kenya Airways to get a 30-year concession to run Kenya's biggest airports. Now, if approved, KQ, as it's commonly known around these parts, would effectively get an airport that handled over 7 million passengers in 2017, over 300,000 tons of cargo, and had over 111,000 takeoffs and landings on it. But for Kenya Airports Authority, that's the state entity that manages JKIA among other airports, this deal basically asks it to cede its biggest single revenue earner to an airline that has lost over $650 million between 2015 and 2017. But here's the thing, it also will not cure one of KQ's biggest problems, its cost structure. Compared to the continent's biggest airline, Ethiopian Airlines, Kenya Airways has about a third of the planes and employees, but its employee costs in 2017 were equivalent to about 72% of what Ethiopian Airlines was paying its people. So given all these facts, is there really a rational business case for this proposed 30-year concession? That's a question I put to Kwame Owino. He's the CEO of the Institute of Economic Affairs.
I do not think that given the structural deficiencies that KQ has, and they're undeniable. Yeah. Simply asking it to run the airport would be the best. It's a confidence trick.
Wouldn't it be easier, though, at least from a government perspective, to simply say if this is really a cost issue yes. For KQ's books, then why not just tackle it through taxes?
Precisely, and I think that's what they don't want to do. Partly because, but I think KQ, and let's remember at the same time that part of this push is by a consortium of corporations that KQ owes a lot of money. Right. It is clear, looking at KQ's bottom lines, that it will not be paid for very, very clearly. So one of the things that they wish to do is to ensure that KQ has a fresh infusion of cash. Then obviously their debts will be prioritized. So part of it is just basically to solve the question about the decision that was made in 2016. Government put in money it did not have because it was cash strapped. It got this consortium of banks to agree to lend KQ for the time being.
To essentially do a debt equity swap.
Precisely, yeah. A debt equity swap. And what it happened was this debt was accorded priority in terms of being paid fast. It's clear from the operations alone that's not going to be paid. But I think it's also dangerous from a conceptual part that KQ has structural problems that need to be solved. One of them is KQ's workers benchmarked against the globe and against the incomes of the company among the highest paid in Africa and the world. That's a fact. KQ pilots earn higher incomes than Ethiopian Airlines pilots, which is a profit-making question. So unless we are dealing with those, we cannot hide that by simply saying, look, let's go up there and actually talk about mimicking the operational model of Etihad.
How to deal with the unions problem? Because the cost base, in part, one of the reasons why the cost base at KQ is as high as it is in part because of the bargaining power yes. that the unions yes. do have. Now, the one argument could be made, look, you could negotiate with the unions and yes. tell them, look, this is the reality that we're facing. These are the economics behind the decisions we have to make, and we have to drop our costs, which yes. unfortunately means that we all have to take part of the pain in terms of pay cuts.
Well, I think the power of unions in Kenya is actually just rising. Many people blame the constitution for it. I do not. I think I blame the fact that you see unions, especially unions in the public sector. And as you understand, the airport authority is partly public sector because it's run as a state corporation. Yeah. So that's part of what it is. So in addition to just having the ability to negotiate and bring their employer to the table, they also understand the political dynamics, which is basically the electorate and the fact that politicians look at much, much more than just the bottom lines. So in many ways, you find the politicians also who today do not want the merger or that strategic partnership between KQ and the airport authority. When KQ makes a decision about cutting down numbers or trying to make sure that it rationalizes its staff, both in terms of costs and the numbers, they'll be opposed to it. So in a way, we sit eyeball to eyeball with contradiction, but the power of unions, I think, is one of the reasons why KQ is in trouble. And I think if that does not happen, even the Kenya Airports Authority would be in trouble in a while.
Given all the things that we're doing here, our politicians are not willing to make the hard decisions yes. to actually streamline, to let KQ actually run as a proper business, to streamline its balance sheet, to drop its costs. But at the same time, we're seeing opposition to the idea of them saying, well, okay, let them have a concession on JKIA.
Yes.
Strictly speaking, why don't we just cash out of the business?
I mean, that's a sensible thing to do. But given the legacy costs that KQ has, nobody's going to buy them at this time. I don't think anybody would. Even KLM is reluctant to put in any more money because they understand that you'll put in money, but the political constraints that comes with this idea that KQ is for some reason a national asset and not necessarily a business means that if you put in your money, you'll be in trouble if you have to make adjustments. And the airlines business globally is very, very competitive. So at one point, you're going to have to make really, really difficult decisions. Now, for a business manager, they're difficult decisions, but you know what you need to do. But getting the political consensus to have it going is going to remain a problem.